Welcome, welcome. This is the Yoga in My School podcast. My name is Donna Freeman. I am the host and founder of Yoga in My School, and you are in for a treat today. Thank you for listening. I want to send great gratitude out to everyone who listens, who watches, who writes reviews and shares these episodes. I work hard at making it valuable to you. And I know today's episode will definitely be of value to you. This is a trending topic. It is a topic that is long overdue to have a light shed on it. And I'm delighted to be able to share our guest with you today. But before we get into all of that, I just want to say that the Yoga in My School podcast is a place that for the past 12 years, we have been sharing tips and techniques and tools on yoga and mindfulness for youth. And there is a plethora of resources in the archives. I continually share archive episodes with people when topics come up in chat groups. The other day, somebody was asking about, oh no, I'm teaching, a class of 9-year-old boys. What do I do? And so I went through the archives and found the episode on yoga for boys and shared it with them. Somebody else did something the other day about music, and I went through and found, a couple of the episodes on music. So there is lots of resources out there for you, and I appreciate you listening, and feel free to go dive into all of the back issues of the podcast. All right. Today we are talking about trauma-informed yoga. And over the last many years, we've touched on this topic a couple of times in kind of obliquely. It's come up in interviews. There's one done by David Trevelyan about trauma-informed mindfulness. I really recommend that podcast episode that you can find on YouTube. I don't think it's in the audio files yet because I haven't gotten there. I should publish that in tandem with this one. There we go. Add it to the to-do list. But today, my guest is Joanne Spence. And Joanne Spence is the amazing author of a brand new book called Trauma-Informed Yoga, a toolbox for therapists, 47 practices to calm, balance, and return and center the nervous system. I can't even read my own darn writing.
Restore
the
nervous system.
It is what it says. Restore the nervous system. Fabulous. Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Donna.
All right. So you and I have kind of worked, a little bit in tandem in different communities in different areas. We've both known about each other. My company is Yoga in My School. Yours is Yoga in Schools. So tell our listeners and watchers a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have for 30 some years, married to an American. I am an Australian Brit, now American, with 3 adult children. And I like to say I'm a recovering social worker. That was my first career. And then I moved into yoga teaching and eventually yoga therapy. And most recently, my third career, I am a spiritual director, a Christian spiritual director. And a lot of the times they blend all 3 of those things. And now I am an author as well. And so I spend my time either teaching or writing, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do those things.
Fantastic. So it kind of sounds like this book is a culmination of your career of bringing the social work, the yoga, and your faith-based kind of all together in a way of helping people heal and providing methodologies in order to access healing. Would that be an accurate kind of description of what you've put together here?
Yes.
It's like 20, 30 years of expertise all in one volume. Fantastic.
Yeah, and I see myself as a translator of being able to put something in, something that can be fairly complex, from understanding trauma to understanding what yoga is about, to understanding things like polyvagal theory, and being able to put it into bite-sized pieces into the hands of the people that are providing direct service. And that's what I have tried to do, because surely there is more to know about trauma, yoga, Polyvagel Theory than what I've written in this fairly modest-sized book that seems to, it's a fairly quick read. So it's really about the translation and how you apply those things to people that have trauma and people that have anxiety, depression, and people that serve those people.
Yeah, and I like how, you were very specific with your title, a toolbox for therapists. Can you tell us about the audience that you were writing for?
Yes, the idea originally started with aiming at teachers because I did found yoga in schools and was working in schools and doing professional development in schools, probably as you do as well. And so it initially was going to be targeted towards teachers. And the first publisher I went to said, we've really got enough content for teachers. Your background is in social work, clinical social work. Why don't you write it to social workers? And at that time, that was maybe 6 years ago, I wasn't ready to do that. I didn't maybe have the writing skills or the confidence to be able to do that myself. But in the interim years, I've done a lot more writing and had more people coming around me, because even though writing is solitary, it takes a lot of people to write a book, as you know. So I realized, specifically working in mental health settings and inpatient psych, where I was leading therapeutic yoga groups for many, many years, and seeing that it was the most basic of tools in my yoga toolbox that was creating change, often immediate change in somebody's nervous system. And I thought, I've spent a lot of time, money, hours training in learning to be a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist. What if we distilled some of this and put it in the hands of skilled clinical therapists, social workers, counselors, mental health specialists? And so why don't you try them in this dosage, in this increment, this titration? And that gained some traction. And, to be honest, people will say, well, can't we do this every day? And I'd be like, well, yes, you can, but I can't come and lead you every day. But this is, I like to say, it's not rocket science, it's neuroscience. So here's how we can practice. And it seemed to be driven by, the force of nature of having a person present. So I thought, well, let's resource the people and make it really clear and really explicitly clear with scripts. So that's how I came to that. And the feedback that I get since I'm no longer a clinical social worker, has been that has what's really helped therapists in looking after themselves and then being comfortable in using this in a traditional talk therapy session without having to do yoga teacher training. So, I think that there will be more that will be interested in that path after they've started doing these things, but I've given them a way to get started was my goal.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I find it interesting that they were saying, we've got lots of stuff for teachers, but this is an area that we don't have very much stuff. And I love the fact that for you, it was kind of this voyage of when the first idea was first brought to you, that you kind of went, I don't know if I can do that. That's not very, but as you grew into it and reflected and as your own practice and expertise grew, that you were able to speak with authority. And I thank you so much. I know the effort that goes into writing and publishing a book. It is huge. And so congratulations. And just for everybody, your book, when is it coming out?
March 9th, it will be released.
Okay, March 9th. And I know that the pre-sales have been going crazy. Like you're already on to like the second publishing run or something like that, something insane.
Yeah, I'm really delighted.
Yeah, there's obviously a need for this at this time. All right. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty of the content of the book for our listeners so that they know what to expect and they can be one of those people to get into the second publishing, because I know it's going to be in high demand for a long time. Okay, so you've in the book, you broke it down kind of into two parts. One is the why and the other is the how or the what, right? So let's kind of get into the why. Like, why are we talking about trauma and our need to intervene, and why has it become like such a buzzword right now?
Yeah, I think that the prevalence of trauma and the realizing that if we take the lens to the widest that we could possibly take it, that most of us have been affected by trauma in some way, either firsthand or in a secondary position. First respond is vicarious trauma, secondary trauma. So that includes a lot of people. And in a quote Bethel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score, quite a bit in the book. And that idea that you can't talk your way out of trauma, and that the body has to have a way to be able to move. And yoga happens to provide a really great basis of breath work, of asana, of movement based, along with the philosophies of yoga that are a more holistic approach. That I don't think it's an and or. It's not that you would never be in talk therapy, and I've greatly benefited from that myself on my own journey of healing from childhood trauma. But as a side by side adjunct, and then if we add on to that your garden variety mental illnesses of depression and anxiety, and now we're seeing higher spikes in PTSD and complex PTSD, that we need these body-based movement, breath work. So that's become the reason of seeing people and hearing from therapists, seeing people stuck, and also seeing mental health workers, therapists, psychologists burning out, or in one article that I quoted in the book, having therapists feeling like they're having the same symptoms, like there's a contagiousness of having the same symptoms as your clients. I know what that's like, and I really have felt it in my own nervous system, and then seeing that these very simple practices create a shift in the nervous system. And it's in the doing, right? We can talk about it all we want, but it's in the actual doing, and not just saying, why don't you try this? Or, here's a handout, but actually doing it with someone. I think that's kind of where the secret sauce is doing it with someone, because it's your own experience and your own nervous system, and sharing that. And that's the co-regulating part that comes up, that's explained through polyvagal theory.
Okay, love it. Yeah, and like you mentioned, just the prevalence and the awareness of the prevalence, I think, is key. Like, trauma isn't anything new, but our awareness of the degree of trauma in our society has increased so much that, that we are now becoming more and more aware of just trauma-informed practices in general, in healthcare and in schools and in yoga studios, that we need to have these practices in place because we are working with the public. And as being a member of the public, yes, traumatized somehow, right, in our past, and like you say, just that prevalence of it. And then how do we help people? And helping people, I love how you said, getting them to do it, to experience it, not just a handout, oh, go do these exercises at home, but let's actually do it together. I'll guide you through, and then you will feel it, you will experience it, you'll notice the shift, and that's where the healing starts to happen. And then you can go and integrate it every day, right? Yeah,
and making sure that we're not triggering people, so that the treatment isn't more traumatizing. And that's what trauma-informed yoga has grown out of, is trauma-informed healthcare. I think there's an evolution of realizing that, particularly, say in the case of sexual trauma, that sometimes the very act of the treatment process was actually re-traumatizing. And so that's the evolution of the need for trauma informed, because it didn't take a lot of knowledge, but some knowledge of how not to re-traumatize people with the treatment.
Mm-hmm. Love it. All right. So you kind of mentioned in passing polyvagal theory. Can you explain what this is and why it's so vital to working with trauma and with bodies?
Yeah, no. But
No.
yeah, no, it's only a 30-minute podcast, but let me just take a shot at, as I said, I see myself as a translator, and it's a translation of Steve Porges's work and a theory that he developed in 1994. And somebody that might be familiar to your audience is Deb Dana, who is a clinical social worker from Maine, who's written Polyvagel Theory in therapy. I've drawn a lot from their work, and it's an understanding of how the vagus nerve affects works with the autonomic nervous system. And I always thought and understood the nervous system to be fight and flight, which we know about, sympathetic, and parasympathetic being the rest and digest. And it turns out that Steve's work has helped us to see that there's two parts to the parasympathetic nervous system. And that was the part that was really transformational for me, to understand that there's two parts. One is called ventral vagal, or sometimes commonly known as this social engagement system. So we're in that now. We're in this focused conversation. We're in a happy place. We're smiling. We're ready to go. But the other part of the parasympathetic is dorsal vagal, and that's the part that is more commonly known in animals as like death fiending, when there is terror and the system shuts down in order to help you survive. So these are really important concepts or circuits to understand, and that the vagus nerve it's all mediated with the vagus nerve that begins all the way up in the higher brainstem and goes through and innervates many of the organs in the body. And the breath is a direct access, the most direct access is what Steve says, to being able to impact the vagus nerve and to create these shifts in the nervous system. And we can actually move into, as you know, with the breath, just with the breath, move from sympathetic to parasympathetic, sympathetic to back to sympathetic, and finding that place of either going to ventral vagal in that happy place, or into that really quiet place, a healthy place in dorsal vagal, where we can be still and have contemplative practice, maybe where we have prayer, meditation. So polyvagal theory, I think, gives a beautiful undergirding to maybe what maybe the ancient sages knew intuitively. We now have some words for that in modern science. So that's the tiny piece. There's a little bit more in the book, but there's so much more to know. But I think it's really worth diving into. Mm-hmm. So thanks for asking.
Yes, no, I love polyvagal theory. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I really like how a yoga practice can take you, as you said, from sympathetic to parasympathetic and back and forth, that you get this practice of being in one and purposefully shifting to the other and experiencing the other, and then moving back. And I like that, because then when in life, you find yourself in one of those two places and it's not feeling right. Maybe you're a little bit too energized and you need to bring yourself down, or you're down and, terrified or right. And you need to come out of that. And so it teaches us those skills to move fluidly between the two. And I love how you say, like, the breath is the access point. And when we use the breath, combine it with movement, it is, magical. Quite magical. All right.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of the first part is this why. Now let's get into the how, because a lot of people, you talk about these 47 practices to calm, balance, and restore the nervous system. Okay, now that we kind of know what we're working with in the body. And you break this down into 4 areas: calming, balancing, energizing, and then visualizations and meditations. Okay, so I'd like to dive just briefly into each one of those if we could. All right, so let's start with the calming. Okay, why this category? And can you give us an example of a calming exercise?
Yes, I'm going to give you just a quick overview because I use a term called, my technical term of a tool belt. And I ask people just to visualize a tool belt with 3 pockets, and it's a calming pocket and an energizing pocket, and the one in between is the balancing. And that's because we know that even though we can do a particular type of breathing, and I'll give you some examples in a moment, we know that if you try it and I try it and 10 other people try it, there might be 12 responses to the same breath. Though we have some general ideas that slower breathing and a longer exhale is going to be calming to the nervous system. But what's important is how it affects your nervous system. And so creating space for people to actually notice what the experience is doing for them, and letting them know that it's okay if they don't have a aha moment right away, but it will over time, because we know that yoga helps us care for ourselves, and it helps us increase our self-awareness, that over time you will start to notice, because you'll get these little inklings, or you'll start to develop your ability to listen to your body, and your body's giving you feedback all the time, but you can't always hear it. So we can fairly safely say that nasal breathing, a slowed down nasal breathing, or say a square breathing, where we're doing a 3 inhale, a 3 pause, 3 exhale, a hold, something like that is probably going to be in our calming side of our tool belt. And so I just say, ask people to park it there until they have any evidence to the contrary. And then things like, I think that there's more intuitiveness of people's understanding of the slowing down of the breath is going to be calming. But then I think it's lesser known that we can do energizing practices, like bellows breath with the, and I think that is always surprising, especially and just delightful when you're feeling in the depths of depression or just the low energy of doing this. And this inhale, exhale, I'm doing bellows breath where it's a, and you can do that 10 times and you're going to feel an elevation of your heart rate, and it's going to have an effect probably similar for some people as maybe like a little jolt of caffeine would, except you don't have the jitters. You didn't have to pay $4 at the coffee shop, though I'm all for supporting small businesses. So that's really good to know. And I'll just say, park that in your energizing pocket, because it's not about being able to do this well in this moment right now. That's when we practice. It's when might this be helpful in my life? As you said, when will this help me again? And maybe if you're a slow starter in the morning like me, that's a really good one to help wake me up. And then we've got practices that are a little bit of both. So when I do an inversion, just this simple seated chair inversion where I'm folding myself forward, maybe even leaning over a big pillow, and my head is a little bit below my heart, as just the most simplest definition of an inversion. Head is below the heart. For me, that is a little bit calming and energizing, but this nice quiet, sort of quiet energy, not a frenetic energy. And so that goes in my balancing pocket. It's a little bit of both. And that's a safe place to park any of the practices while you're trying to figure out what they are. And then with the imagery and doing the meditations, it's really good to practice being able to use our imagination to be able to take ourselves to a place. And, you know, that's a useful thing for us to practice, again, when we don't need it. And that different people are going to find different reasons for doing that. Because some people, I'm quite energized by doing their visualizations. For other people, that is very calming. But for all of them, it's also a distraction. And there are times when we need distraction, or we're getting ready for surgery, and we need to be able to find, you know, for want of a better term, a happy place. Practicing doing that, practicing summoning an image, being able to see yourself in a story and put yourself place yourself in a story is a really useful skill to have. So we're just using those things as skill building exercises, and then helping create the space to know, where does that matter in my real life, of where will that be useful? Because if you have an anxiety disorder and you find yourself at the grocery store and you're on the verge of a panic attack, but you have the wherewithal to know what's happening, if you can just pause for a moment and kind of hide behind the vegetable stand, you might be able to just take a moment and practice your breathing, have a visualization for a moment, and be able to self-soothe. And if you've ever had a panic attack in public, or people have called paramedics because they're not quite sure if you're having a heart attack. I mean, there's so many layers of challenges that are happening in that moment. So one of the things I've seen is helping resource people to, particularly in situations like that, of what would I do if this is all I've got, and it's this option or the paramedics coming, and people have done that successfully. So
I love the aspect of these practices that they're portable, that if you can breathe, you can do them. If you have a body in any way, shape, or form, that you can do these practices. They're highly adaptable to you. And like you say, that, you know, they go with you wherever you are. And I love that, you know, that aspect of yoga is really empowering. It's not just for when you're rolled out your mat. It's not just for when you've decided, oh, it's my yoga practice time. It's like, no, like every day, whenever you're facing a challenge or you want to incorporate these and feel better and more connected to self, these practices are a beautiful tool to facilitate that.
Yeah, well said.
All right. I have a question about the visualizations, and I'm just asking you this because it comes up in the trainings that I offer on this same topic. And the question is, right, we don't want to re-traumatize people. How are we to know what visualizations would traumatize people, and how do we kind of navigate that? How do we offer meditations that will be beneficial?
Yeah, so it's a tough one. You might not know, and sometimes it might be trial and error, and sometimes it might be I wrote this primarily with a therapist in mind that will be working one-on-one with somebody, so that you can ask somebody. I thought maybe we could try this visualization for this reason, and we're going to talk about rabbits or this forest. Or does that sound like something that would be an inviting thing for you to try? And or you already know some of their history, and so that you can say, well, I have some knowledge of knowing that this person had trauma in a wooded area. I'm not going to use that one about the tree. So I think it's some common sense, but sometimes it's just talking to the person in front of you and using clinical judgment, because you can't know, because it could be somebody could be triggered by anything. And I think going in with the intention of listening and getting feedback from the person directly.
Awesome.
Is a good
Thank
course
you.
of action.
Thank you. All right. And so the other question or the other thing that I've noticed is most people tend to be fairly okay with telling you if something doesn't feel right in their body in a position. Like you might put them in, like a warrior position, a nice strong physical position, or you move through some breath of joy or something like that, and they'll tell you if it feels good or not, or they'll stop if it just doesn't feel good. It's like, this doesn't feel good, I'm not doing this. But conversely, when we get into meditation, sometimes people will just say, well, it's a meditation, I was supposed to do it and I didn't stop even though it didn't feel good. How can we empower our clients, our students, the people that we're working with, to be able to make those judgment calls for themselves?
So that is I think the definition of agency is creating the environment of helping people to find their voice, to be able to say, not today. And that we use the invitational language, and because you're in a position of power as a teacher, as a therapist, and somebody might want to please you by doing it right, or doing what it is you're suggesting. And to be able to say, hold something very loosely, if something doesn't feel right today for any reason at all, just stop and return to a normal, or I might say a typical, rather than the word normal, a typical breath for you. And just pause and let me know. You might figure out a sign, a signal they could give you ahead of time. And this gets a little bit more complex if you've got a group of people, but being straightforward and concrete in, we're gonna sit in this particular way, and if at some point you want to stop, you're just gonna sit up and open your eyes and orient yourself to the room, and I'll know that you're done for now. Something as simple as that, so that they get to choose what it is that they're engaging in, and that they always have an out and a stopping point at any point. And in fact, you're encouraging them to do that. So your own voice, the tone, invitational language, and giving somebody a concrete way, like giving the example, just sitting up and breathing typically, I think are really good ways to give cueing or instruction.
Fabulous. Thank you. Like, yay. It's so good to hear these reinforced again and again, and and to see those well, for me, especially in the yoga world, to see that shift in cueing to invitational language, to agency, that please don't follow me, because my practice shouldn't be your practice. Your practice is your own, and you're going to need to cultivate that listening skill to what feels best for you. But I love your idea that you gave there of giving someone what they can do to come out, like giving them permission and then giving them an example, and just say, and then I'll know you're done for the day. And that's great. All right. Love it. Love it, love it. I know that you're a big fan and a big cheerleader of these practices are accessible to all. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about people who don't think this is no work for me? Like, why would I want to try this? What do you say to that kind of pushback if people are a little bit hesitant or reticent?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that anybody that wants to try the practices, that it will be an experience of them feeling a shift in the nervous system. But you've got to want to. I wish that I sometimes wish that I could wave my wand and I could get everybody that's in front of me or in the acute care facility, psychiatric facilities that I work in, to sit and breathe and move. But there has to be some sense of that agency, that voluntarily that consent, said, yeah, I might not know what it's about, but I'm going to listen to you, lady. I'm going to give this a try, you know, even if it's sort of that sort of, and I really affirmed that. And I said, just, yeah, give me 10 minutes. And if you haven't heard anything that you see of any benefit to you, then feel free to leave. But let's just give it a try. And then pulling everything out of the the toolbox so they can put them in their tool belt. And I found that, you know, it's being able to, you know, treating people with dignity and respect, knowing that they have choices, even in a very limited setting, like an inpatient psychiatric unit where the door is locked. People feel like they have a lot of their freedoms taken away from them. So always having a choice. I have found, you know, some of the most surprising people have tried, and I've worked with, you know, a lot of veterans. People are like, oh, they're not going to do yoga. I'm like, well, you know, people said that about 5th grade boys. They're not going to want to do yoga. Well, you know, give them some compelling reason. Do they need a little science? Do they need some practice right away, to a breathing practice that they can feel successful at and feel the switch in the nervous system? Do they need to know that, no, you don't have to be flexible to do these things? That's not a requirement. Never has been, unless you're, you know, asana is all you're practicing, and it really means something to you to touch your toes. You know, that's not what we're talking about. So yeah, it has to be, all right, I'll give it a try. I don't mind reluctance. Reluctance is resistance, but resistance as in, you know, I'm here because I have to, that just doesn't work. And I've been in situations where people have been forced to be in the class, and it was unpleasant for them, and it was certainly unpleasant for me. So
yeah, I like that. I like you're saying that if we're really going to provide people with agency, it has to start all the way from the very beginning, not just in our cueing and those type of things, but it's like, why would I want to force you to do this? I know these are beneficial. I firmly believe that it will make a difference in your life, but you have to want it. And as you want it, then you will feel the transformation. But there is an initial mindset there, a desire to, at least an openness to experiment.
Yeah, and that it's like when you're ready. That's the best we can do.
Yes. Yeah. And then be there waiting and willing to assist when people are ready. Beautiful.
Yes.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to add while we're chatting on this topic?
I think that if there are people that are listening that are struggling with anxiety or depression or some trauma-related issues, that a gentle and restorative yoga practice is really something you want to think about including in your life. And I would really encourage you to find some resources to do that. There is online content, and there are lots of practices, and you'll know in the first few minutes of a practice if it is sitting right with you. But I really urge you to look into these non-drug interventions as an additional part of being well, and knowing that we all need support, and that this is a really gentle restorative yoga, slowing down, surprisingly effective way to bring our mental health into a more balanced way. And I speak from my own personal experience of how the practice has impacted me, and how my family are very happy that I practice and teach yoga. So that's a personal and a professional testimony.
Thank you very much. All right. So for all those listeners who've made it this far, I appreciate you sticking with us. There's so much great content here, but Joanne has offered a giveaway. So for about a week after we air this podcast, there will be a giveaway hosted on Yoga in My School for a copy of her book, for a copy of Trauma-Informed Yoga, a toolbox for therapists, 47 practices to calm, balance, and restore the nervous system. And you'll have all 47 of those practices on your tool belt ready to employ. All right. So enter. There'll be lots of different ways to enter, and we'll have that run, and then we will draw one lucky winner, and they get your book. Yay!
Yay.
I'm very excited about that. All right. And for people who are listening and watching, how do they get in touch with you, or how can they find out more about the work that you are doing? Where are you on social media and all those kind of things?
Yes, I have a website, joannespence.com. I'm on Instagram at Urban Oasis PGH, and I'm on Facebook just under my name, and there's an Urban Oasis Pittsburgh and a Yoga and Schools page on Facebook, and that's about all I can handle. Oh, Clubhouse! I love Clubhouse. It's a new platform that I'm enjoying, and yeah, all those places.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It has been a delight chatting with you all the way from and I'm up here in Canada, and I appreciate everybody from around the world who listens. We have most of our listeners in the US, but all the way from Britain and Australia and South Africa and Brazil. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Yoga in My School podcast. It means the world to me. All right. Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate your time and expertise and sharing so generously with us as you have, and for sharing your expertise through your book. And I know that that will live on for many, many years and influence and inspire many people. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
All right. If you've liked this episode, if it has resonated with you, or if someone you know has come to mind while you've been listening, I encourage you to like it, to share it, to do all those wonderful social interaction things that mean that more people can discover the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Have a great evening. Namaste.